Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into the story of how a simple act of kindness can change a life forever. A woman, down on her luck, saves a stranger. Little does she know, this stranger is about to reveal a secret that will turn her world upside down. It was a rainy evening in the heart of New York City. The streets shimmered under the soft glow of streetlights, reflecting the hurried pace of pedestrians trying to escape the downpour. Emma Brooks, a young woman in her late 20s, walked briskly down the sidewalk, her worn-out shoes splashing in the puddles as she rushed toward the subway. She wasn't used to the city's rush, but she had no choice. The job interview she had been desperately waiting for was in just a few hours, and it was her last chance to keep her head above water. She checked her phone again. "It's not too late," she muttered to herself. "I'll get there." But her heart sank as she glanced at the time. She had barely enough money for the subway fare, and even if she made it, she knew she was already late. As she rounded the corner to the subway station, the rain came down harder, soaking her through. But then, through the mist, she noticed something, a figure standing in the middle of the sidewalk, looking lost and out of place. It was a man, probably in his 40s, with dark, wet hair clinging to his forehead, dressed in a sleek black suit that was now drenched. He looked at his phone, his brow furrowed, seemingly deep in thought but visibly struggling with something. Emma paused for a moment, watching him. He looked like he could use help, but in her current state, she wasn't sure if she should even approach. Still, something about him caught her attention. Perhaps it was the way he seemed completely unaware of the rain pouring down on him, or maybe it was his exhaustion that mirrored her own. Without thinking, Emma stepped forward. "Hey, you okay?" she asked, her voice a little shaky, as she approached the man. He looked up at her, startled, his confusion clear in his eyes. "Sorry, I was just trying to figure out where I am," he said, his voice low and uncertain. Emma smiled awkwardly, feeling her nerves start to creep in. "I'm Emma," she said, extending a hand. "Where are you trying to go?" The man hesitated for a moment before shaking her hand. "Liam," he said, glancing at his phone. "I'm trying to find my way to the conference center, but I think I'm lost. My GPS is acting up, and I don't really know the city well." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had lived in the city her whole life and knew the streets like the back of her hand. "I can help with that," Emma said, trying to hide the weariness in her voice. "I'm headed to the subway, but I know a shortcut that should get you there faster." She motioned for him to follow her. "It's not far. I'll walk you to the subway entrance, and we can get you on the right track." Liam looked at her for a moment, then smiled faintly, a tired but grateful expression crossing his face. "I appreciate it. I think I've just had one of those days," he said, falling into step beside her. Not exactly the best start to a week in the city. Emma could relate more than she wanted to admit. It seemed like everything in her life was a struggle lately. She was always one step behind, always fighting to stay afloat. But walking with Liam felt oddly comforting, like for once, someone else was struggling, too. As they walked, Liam shared more about his trip to New York. Emma, eager to make conversation and distract herself from her own worries, asked about his work. "I'm in tech," he said, his voice a little distant. "I help manage some software development projects." Emma nodded, trying to keep the conversation going, but she couldn't help but wonder what kind of tech project would bring someone to the city in this weather. She smiled softly to herself, thinking about her own job as a waitress, constantly juggling her shifts and struggling to pay bills. "That sounds interesting," Emma said, trying to keep the mood light. "I can't say I'm great with tech myself. I can barely figure out my phone half the time." Liam chuckled softly, his eyes lighting up as he smiled at her. "You're not the only one," he said. "Most people can't either." As they reached the subway entrance, Emma pointed out where he needed to go. "Here's the station. You'll find your way from here," she said. Liam looked at her, his expression a mix of gratitude and curiosity. "Thanks, Emma," he said, offering a faint smile. "I'll make sure to pay it forward." Emma nodded, smiling awkwardly, but as she turned to leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to Liam than just another stranger she had helped on the street. She didn't know it yet, but this simple act of kindness was about to change her life in ways she could never have imagined. It had been 2 weeks since Emma had helped Liam in the rain. Her life, though still filled with uncertainty, had taken an unexpected turn. The interview she had been desperately waiting for had gone surprisingly well. She had landed a temporary job at a small art gallery, a step in the direction she had always dreamed of. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Every day felt like a small victory, especially after the string of bad luck she had endured. Despite the relief, there was still a lingering sense of unease, as if the world was about to throw another challenge her way. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a text message from an unknown number. "Hi Emma, it's Liam. I hope you're doing well. I'd like to thank you again for your help the other night. Would you be interested in meeting for coffee? I think I owe you a proper thank you." She stared at the message for a moment, the words slowly sinking in. Was this the same man she had helped? She didn't expect to hear from him again. After all, he was just a stranger she'd helped on a rainy day. She hesitated for a moment before responding, feeling a little nervous. "Hi Liam, I'm glad you're doing well. Coffee sounds nice. When and where?" She hit send, her fingers trembling slightly. It wasn't often that she agreed to meet people she barely knew, but something about Liam's message felt sincere. Maybe it was because he hadn't forgotten about her, or perhaps it was just the curiosity that tugged at her. They agreed to meet the next day at a small cafe near Central Park. The weather was clear, the sun shining brightly, but Emma still felt the same nerves she always did before meeting someone new. She arrived early, taking a seat by the window, her hands fidgeting with the sleeve of her jacket. It had been so long since she had been on a proper date, and although she wasn't sure this was one, she couldn't help but feel a flutter of anticipation. When Liam walked in, he was as impeccably dressed as she remembered. He looked more polished than he had on the rainy evening when they first met. He walked towards her, a smile forming on his lips as their eyes met. "Emma," he greeted her warmly. "It's good to see you again." His voice had a certain ease to it that made her feel comfortable. He sat down across from her, his posture relaxed but professional. "Good to see you too," Emma replied, smiling back. She was still surprised that he had reached out, but she couldn't deny that she was curious about him. "How's everything going with you?" she asked, wanting to steer the conversation into safer territory. Liam smiled, his eyes softening as he leaned back in his chair. "Everything's good. Busy with work, but that's nothing new. I've been thinking a lot about the other night. You were the first person in a long time who didn't seem to care about who I was or what I did. It was refreshing." His words took Emma by surprise. He had never really opened up to her before, and here he was, speaking to her with a kind of vulnerability. Emma shifted in her seat, unsure of how to respond. She hadn't thought much about their brief conversation that night, but now that he mentioned it, she realized it was true. She had helped him without knowing anything about his wealth or his identity, and he hadn't acted like a typical businessman either. He seemed genuine. But there was something else in his eyes now, something she couldn't quite place. "I don't really think about those things," Emma said, shrugging lightly. "I just did what anyone would have done." She looked down at her cup, feeling a little uncomfortable with the attention. She wasn't used to being admired for something so simple. Liam laughed softly, and the sound was warm. "That's the thing, Emma. Most people would have just walked by, not caring. You didn't. I appreciate that more than you know." There was a pause before he added, "I've been thinking about how I can repay you for your kindness. I don't want to sound like I'm trying to buy your favor, but I'd like to offer you a job. At my company, we're starting a new initiative, and I think your background in art could be a perfect fit." He sat back in his chair, watching her closely. Emma froze. "A job? With your company," she repeated, her mind racing. She had expected the conversation to go in a completely different direction. "Why me?" she asked, still processing the offer. Liam's gaze softened. "Because you're genuine, Emma. You don't play games, and you have a passion for something real. I think that's exactly what we need. I know it might seem like a lot, but it's a great opportunity. No strings attached." He looked at her, waiting for her response, his eyes sincere. Emma felt a mix of emotions. She had always dreamed of working in the art world, but the idea of working for a billionaire seemed too far out of reach. She had spent most of her life fighting to survive, never expecting an opportunity like this to fall into her lap. But here it was, staring her in the face. She wasn't sure if she could trust the offer or if she was just caught up in the fantasy of it all. But there was something about Liam's demeanor that made her believe he wasn't offering it out of pity. "I don't know what to say," Emma said finally, her voice quiet. "This is all so unexpected." She took a deep breath, looking him in the eye. "But, thank you. I'll think about it." She could feel the weight of the decision already settling on her shoulders. Liam nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Take your time. There's no rush. But I think you'll find that it could be the change you've been waiting for." With that, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, but Emma couldn't stop thinking about the offer. Her life was about to change, whether she was ready or not. It had been a week since Emma had last met Liam. Since then, the offer he made had been weighing heavily on her mind. She had never imagined that one small act of kindness could lead to such an opportunity, yet here she was, staring at the email invitation from Liam's company. The subject line read, "New opportunity awaits." She had been hesitant at first, unsure whether to take the leap into a world so different from the one she had known. But as she read through the details again, something in her stirred. She had always dreamed of working in the art world, but it had always seemed out of reach. Maybe this was her chance. The day she was supposed to meet with the team at Liam's company, Emma found herself standing outside the sleek glass building in Midtown Manhattan, her heart pounding in her chest. The city's noise faded into the background as she took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. This was not her world. She was used to small, cozy spaces, working with people who didn't have fancy titles or millions in the bank. But here she was, walking into a high-rise office where everything looked expensive, polished, and intimidating. She paused before the doors, gathering her courage. It had only been a week since Liam had offered her the job, but it felt like an eternity. She thought back to their conversation, how his eyes had softened when he spoke about the opportunity, how genuine his offer had seemed. But now that she was here, she wasn't so sure. Could she really fit into this world? Could someone like her, someone who had always struggled, make it in a company like this? With a deep breath, Emma pushed open the doors and stepped inside. The receptionist greeted her with a smile, directing her to the elevators. As she rode up, her thoughts raced. What if she wasn't good enough? What if they saw her as an outsider, just some girl from the lower part of the city who didn't belong in their world of billion-dollar deals and high-end projects? She couldn't let those thoughts take over. She had made it this far, and she was going to give it her best shot. When she stepped into the conference room, Liam was already waiting for her. He stood up when she entered, offering her a warm smile. "Emma, I'm glad you made it," he said. His voice was calm, but there was an intensity in his eyes that made her feel both nervous and oddly reassured at the same time. "Thank you for having me," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. She felt a little out of place, standing in front of a conference table with a group of well-dressed professionals, all of them watching her as if she were the next big thing they had been waiting for. Liam gestured for her to sit down. "Please, take a seat. I know this is a big step, and I appreciate you taking the time to come here today." He turned to the others in the room. "This is Emma Brooks. She has a unique perspective on the art world, and I believe she could help us with our new initiative. We're starting a program to bring art into the lives of those who need it, most people in communities that often don't have access to it. Emma, I'd like you to meet the rest of the team." Emma nodded, trying to keep her composure. The team introduced themselves, each one giving her a firm handshake and a smile. They seemed eager, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were all sizing her up. She had never been in a room like this, surrounded by people who were clearly well-versed in high-stakes business and philanthropy. She was just an art lover with a few sketches in her portfolio. What could she possibly offer to these people? But Liam seemed confident in her. "We're going to be working together to bring real change to communities that are often overlooked," he said, his voice strong and unwavering. "Emma's vision is what we need to make this happen. She has the drive, the passion, and the heart for this project." He looked directly at her, and for a moment, their eyes locked. Emma could see the belief in his gaze. It made her stomach flip. The meeting went smoothly, with Emma answering questions and discussing her ideas for the program. She could feel her confidence growing, bit by bit. There was something about Liam's unwavering support that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she could do this. She wasn't just some outsider, she had something to offer, something that these people needed. And slowly, the doubts she had been carrying began to fade away. By the end of the meeting, Liam stood up and shook her hand. "We'll get started right away," he said. "Welcome to the team, Emma. I'm really looking forward to what we can accomplish together." Emma smiled, feeling a sense of pride she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just the job offer or the money, it was the sense of belonging, the belief that she could make a difference. As she walked out of the building that afternoon, Emma couldn't help but smile. This was it, her life was changing. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The next few weeks flew by in a whirlwind. Emma found herself diving deeper into her new role, her days filled with meetings, brainstorming sessions, and a steady flow of creative ideas. It was nothing like the life she had known before. Each day felt like a fresh start, a chance to prove herself in a world that once seemed so out of reach. Liam's faith in her was unwavering, and she could see the team's respect for her growing with each passing day. She was starting to make a real difference, bringing new perspectives to their art outreach program, and it felt incredible. But even as Emma settled into this new routine, a part of her still struggled to believe that this was real. She had always been the girl who had to fight for every inch, who had to scrape by just to survive. Yet here she was, working with some of the most influential people in the city, with opportunities unfolding in front of her like a dream she couldn't quite wake up from. It was all so new, so different, and it left her questioning whether she truly belonged. One afternoon, after a particularly long meeting, Liam suggested they grab coffee together. Emma had come to enjoy these moments with him. While their professional relationship was important, their conversations felt like a breath of fresh air, a chance to relax, laugh, and connect on a personal level. She always found herself at ease in his presence, his calm demeanor a soothing contrast to the chaos of her thoughts. They sat down at their usual cafe, the one by the park, and Emma took a deep breath as she stared out the window. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm orange glow over the city. Liam, as usual, seemed calm and collected, but there was a noticeable tension in his posture today. Emma noticed it immediately. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft, concern creeping into her tone. Liam took a long sip of his coffee, setting the cup down with a sigh. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he said, his voice distant, almost as if he was speaking to himself more than to her. "About this project, about the company. Things are moving fast, and sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough." He paused, glancing at her. "You ever feel like you're not doing enough, no matter how hard you try?" His question hung in the air, the vulnerability in his eyes surprising Emma. She took a moment before answering, her thoughts swirling. "I think that's a feeling we all have, especially when we're trying to prove ourselves. But Liam, I've seen what you've done, what you're building. This program? It's going to change lives. You're already making a difference." She smiled, her words genuine. He nodded slowly, but his expression didn't change. "I appreciate that, Emma. I do. But sometimes I feel like I'm just going through the motions, and it's hard to keep up with the pressure. I've got so many people depending on me, and I don't always know if I'm doing the right thing." His voice faltered slightly, a rare crack in his usually steady demeanor. Emma reached across the table, placing a hand over his. She hadn't expected this kind of openness from him, especially not now. Liam Parker, the successful CEO, the man with everything, wasn't immune to doubt or uncertainty. For the first time, she saw him not as her boss but as a person, just like anyone else, struggling with the weight of responsibility. "You're doing more than enough," Emma said softly, her voice firm with conviction. "The fact that you care this much, that you're willing to ask these questions, it's what makes you different. It's what makes you a good leader." She squeezed his hand, giving him a reassuring smile. Liam looked down at her hand on his for a moment, then back up at her. His expression softened, and for a moment, the tension between them seemed to ease. "I guess I needed to hear that," he admitted, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Thank you, Emma. You always seem to know what to say." His voice was light now, the heaviness lifting just a little. The conversation shifted, moving away from work and back to lighter topics. But Emma couldn't help but feel that something had shifted between them. There was a connection there, something deeper than just colleagues working together. And as much as she tried to push the thought away, the truth was undeniable. There was more than just professional respect between them. But she wasn't sure if she was ready to explore that yet, or even if it was something she could pursue. Later that evening, as Emma walked back to her apartment, her mind raced. The offer from Liam had already changed her life in so many ways, but now, with this new layer of intimacy, things were starting to feel even more complicated. She wasn't sure where this would lead, but one thing was clear: her life was about to take another unexpected turn, and for better or worse, she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. The next few days were a whirlwind for Emma. She had settled into her new role at Liam's company, and while her confidence had grown with each passing day, she still felt the weight of her old life lingering in the background. The art program she was working on was taking shape beautifully, and she felt a sense of pride in what they were accomplishing together. Yet, despite the successes and the newfound purpose, there was still an undeniable tension whenever Liam was around. It was something subtle, something she couldn't put her finger on. But it was there, hanging between them like an unspoken truth. One Friday evening, after a particularly productive week at the office, Liam invited Emma to attend an exclusive charity gala that his company was hosting. Emma hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready to step into such a glamorous world, but Liam insisted. "You've been working so hard, Emma," he said. "You deserve to be there. Plus, it'll give you a chance to see everything we've been talking about in action." She agreed, albeit reluctantly, and found herself getting ready for a night she wasn't sure she was prepared for. She stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the black dress she had borrowed from a friend. It was a beautiful dress, but she couldn't help but feel out of place. She had never been someone who wore fancy clothes or attended extravagant events. But tonight was different. This was Liam's world, and somehow, she had become a part of it. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that she had earned this moment. She wasn't just a waitress anymore, she was a professional, a part of something much bigger. When she arrived at the gala, the venue took her breath away. The room was filled with opulence, crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, and guests dressed in designer suits and gowns. The atmosphere was electric, and Emma felt a flutter of nerves as she entered the grand hall. She spotted Liam across the room, looking every bit the part of the confident CEO. He was talking to a group of well-dressed businessmen, but as soon as he saw her, his face lit up. He excused himself and walked over to her, offering his hand with a smile. "Emma, you look stunning," he said, his voice warm and genuine. "I'm glad you could make it." She smiled, feeling a rush of warmth at his compliment, though she still felt a little out of place. "Thank you," she replied, her voice a little shaky. "This is incredible. I've never been to anything like this before." She glanced around, taking in the extravagance. Liam chuckled softly. "It's not what I'm used to either," he said with a playful smile. "But it's important for the company. Tonight is all about showcasing our initiative, raising funds, and making connections." He took her arm gently and led her through the crowd. Emma couldn't help but notice how effortlessly he navigated the room, his presence commanding attention, his smile disarming even the most powerful people. As they walked, Liam introduced Emma to several people in the art world, many of whom she recognized from her work. Each conversation was polite and businesslike, but Emma felt a little overwhelmed. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, and she could tell that some people were curious about her, this new face in their exclusive world. But through it all, Liam stayed by her side, offering words of encouragement and making her feel like she truly belonged. The evening passed in a blur of handshakes, laughter, and clinking glasses. Emma felt herself growing more comfortable with each passing moment, though the excitement of the night still hadn't fully sunk in. As the gala drew to a close, Liam excused himself for a moment to speak with the event organizers, leaving Emma standing near the grand staircase. She gazed around, taking it all in, the beauty of the night, the accomplishments that were unfolding before her. And then, for a moment, her eyes met Liam's across the room. There was something about the way he looked at her that made her heart race. He walked over to her, his steps purposeful but slow. "I hope you enjoyed the night," he said softly. "I wanted you to see the bigger picture. What we're really building here. It's not just about art or business, it's about making a difference. And you're a big part of that." His words hit Emma like a wave, and she couldn't help but feel a rush of emotion. She had been so focused on proving herself, on finding her place, that she hadn't fully understood the magnitude of what they were doing. This wasn't just a job, it was a chance to change lives. For a moment, the noise of the party seemed to fade away. All she could hear was the steady beat of her own heart, and in that moment she realized something she had been too afraid to admit: her feelings for Liam were growing stronger. She wasn't sure what that meant for their future, but for the first time, she felt like she wasn't just playing a role. She was part of something real, something meaningful. The night ended with a quiet drive back to her apartment. As she stepped out of the car, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to change again. She had always lived her life one step at a time, but now, with Liam's world opening up to her, she wondered where this new path would lead. The days that followed the gala felt like a blur. Emma had barely come down from the high of that unforgettable night, but the reality of her new life was starting to settle in. She was working alongside some of the brightest minds in the art and business worlds, and her contributions were beginning to make an impact. The outreach program she had helped design was already gaining traction, and soon, they would be implementing it in several communities. But even as she worked hard and saw progress, there was a gnawing feeling in the back of her mind, a feeling that something was changing between her and Liam. They continued to spend more time together outside of work. Liam had made it clear that he valued her not just as a colleague, but as a friend. They often went out for coffee after long meetings or took walks in the park when things got too hectic. There was always a lightness to their conversations, a comfort between them that made Emma feel like she could share her thoughts without hesitation. But recently, those moments had begun to feel different, more intimate, more personal. One evening, after a particularly long day of work, Liam invited Emma to grab dinner. She hesitated for only a moment before agreeing, knowing that these small gestures were becoming more than just professional. They had a connection, and though Emma tried to ignore it, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening between them that neither of them had fully acknowledged. They met at a cozy Italian restaurant near the office, the dim lights casting a warm glow over the small wooden tables. Emma arrived a few minutes early, trying to shake off the tension that had built up over the past few days. She had started to realize that her feelings for Liam were growing stronger, and it terrified her. What did this mean for their working relationship? Would it complicate everything? She wasn't sure she was ready for the answers to those questions, but she knew she had to face them sooner or later. Liam arrived shortly after, dressed casually but still looking effortlessly put together. His usual confident smile was softer tonight, and as he sat down across from her, Emma noticed the slight crease between his brows. "Long day?" she asked, her voice gentle. Liam nodded, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer than usual. "Yeah, a bit. But it's always better when I get to unwind with someone who actually listens." He gave her a playful smile, but there was an edge to his words that Emma didn't miss. He was tired, but there was something else there, something more vulnerable. The waiter came by to take their orders, and they both picked their meals with ease. As the conversation continued, Emma found herself drawn into the comfort of the evening, her nerves slowly melting away. She could sense Liam was distracted, though. His usual light-heartedness was gone, replaced with a quiet intensity that only seemed to deepen as the evening wore on. After dinner, they took a walk along the nearby river, the cool night air refreshing against their skin. The sound of the water lapping against the shore filled the silence between them, and Emma found herself lost in thought. "I've been thinking a lot lately," Liam said suddenly, his voice low. Emma turned to look at him, unsure of where the conversation was going. "About what?" she asked, her heart picking up its pace. She wasn't sure why, but the tension in the air had shifted again, and it made her uneasy. "About us," Liam replied, his eyes meeting hers. "About this, what's happening between us." His voice was steady, but there was a vulnerability in his eyes that made Emma's heart race. She felt a lump form in her throat, her mind trying to process his words. She opened her mouth to speak but hesitated. She had been feeling the same way, but she wasn't sure if it was something they should address. They were both professionals, after all, and mixing business with personal feelings could lead to complications neither of them needed. Liam, she began, her voice soft, I don't know if this is a good idea. We're working together, and we've both got so much on our plates right now. What if it messes things up? She tried to hide the vulnerability in her own voice, but she knew Liam could hear it. Liam stopped walking, turning to face her. There was a long pause before he spoke, his words slow but deliberate. I don't want to mess things up either, Emma, he said, his voice gentle. But I also don't want to ignore what's happening between us. I can't pretend it's just about work anymore. I care about you. More than I've let on. He took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She had known there was something between them, but hearing him say it out loud made it real, and for a moment, she wasn't sure how to react. She wanted to run away from it all, to ignore the pull she felt toward him. But deep down, she knew she couldn't. She looked up at him, her heart pounding in her chest. I care about you too, Liam, she whispered, her words barely audible. But I'm scared. I don't want to ruin everything we've worked for. It's complicated. Liam smiled softly, his hand gently brushing against hers. I know, he said. But sometimes, the things worth having are the ones that scare us the most. The words hung in the air between them, and Emma couldn't deny that part of her agreed. As they stood there, the world around them felt suspended in time. There were no easy answers, no clear path forward, but one thing was certain: this was only the beginning of something neither of them could ignore. The next few days were filled with a quiet tension. Emma couldn't stop thinking about her conversation with Liam by the river. His words echoed in her mind, each one leaving her both comforted and unsettled. They hadn't spoken much about it since that night, both of them carrying the weight of what had been said but not fully acknowledging it. At work, things continued as usual. The art program was taking shape beautifully, and Emma felt proud of the progress they were making. Yet, every time she saw Liam, there was an unspoken understanding between them, something that neither of them seemed ready to address. One afternoon, while Emma was sitting at her desk, working on a new proposal for the program, her phone buzzed. It was a text message from Liam. Can we meet tonight? I think we need to talk. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She didn't need to read the message twice to know that this conversation was long overdue. It was as if the universe had been pushing them toward this moment, and now, they couldn't avoid it any longer. She quickly replied, sure, where and when? Her hands trembled slightly as she typed, but she didn't have time to second-guess herself. She wanted to know where they stood, what was really going on between them. Was it just the chemistry of working together, or was there something more? She didn't know, but tonight, she would find out. Later that evening, Emma arrived at the small cafe they had visited a few weeks ago, the one near the park. She was early, as usual, and took a seat by the window, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. She tried to steady her thoughts, but they were a whirlwind of uncertainty. She had always kept her personal life separate from her professional one, but now, with Liam, those lines were starting to blur. When Liam walked in, he looked different somehow. His usual confident stride was tempered with a sense of apprehension that she hadn't seen before. He was still as polished as ever, but there was something more vulnerable about him tonight. He smiled when he saw her, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Hey, he said softly as he sat down across from her. Thanks for meeting me. His voice was steady, but Emma could tell he was struggling with something. She nodded, her stomach twisting as she met his gaze. Of course, Emma replied, her voice calm despite the nerves she felt. What did you want to talk about? She tried to keep her tone light, but it was impossible to ignore the weight of the moment. Liam took a deep breath, his hands clasped together on the table. I've been thinking a lot about us. About everything that's happened between us. He paused, his eyes searching hers, as if trying to find the right words. I know we haven't exactly talked about this, but I need to know where we stand. I care about you, Emma. More than I probably should, considering everything. His words were honest, raw, and it made Emma's heart race. She swallowed hard, the words catching in her throat. She had known this conversation was coming, but now that it was happening, she wasn't sure what to say. She cared about him too, but she had been so afraid of what that meant. Would it change everything? Would it ruin their work? She had never allowed herself to get this close to someone before, and the thought of it all collapsing terrified her. I care about you too, Liam, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. But I don't want to lose what we've built here. Our work, this program, it means everything to me. She paused, looking down at her hands. I'm scared that if we get too close, it could all fall apart. Her words hung in the air, heavy with fear and uncertainty. Liam reached across the table, his hand gently covering hers. His touch was warm and reassuring, and for a moment, it felt like the whole world had stopped moving around them. I get it, he said, his voice steady and calm. I don't want to jeopardize what we have either, Emma. But I also don't want to pretend like nothing's happening between us. I don't want to let fear hold us back from something that could be amazing. He looked at her with such sincerity that it took her breath away. Emma's heart was pounding in her chest, the room feeling smaller, the air thicker. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that whatever this was between them could work. But she wasn't sure if she was ready to take that leap, to allow herself to fully open up to someone after all these years of keeping her guard up. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the cafe seemed distant, as if everything outside of this conversation didn't matter. And then, Liam gently squeezed her hand, bringing her back to the present. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out, he said softly, his voice full of quiet determination. But I need you to know that I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. His words were simple, but they carried so much weight, and for the first time in a long time, Emma felt the smallest spark of hope. Emma looked at him, her heart still racing, but for the first time, she felt like she could breathe. Whatever came next, she wasn't alone in this anymore. And that thought made all the difference. The following days felt like a delicate balance between excitement and uncertainty. Emma and Liam's relationship had shifted, and though they hadn't labeled it yet, it was undeniable that something was growing between them. At work, everything continued to move forward, but there was an added layer to their dynamic now. The moments when their eyes would meet across the room or when they found themselves laughing together felt different. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that this whatever it was not just about work anymore. It was personal. And though she felt the pull between them, she was still cautious, still hesitant to fully dive into something that could complicate everything. One afternoon, as Emma was leaving the office, she noticed a message on her phone. It was from Liam. Dinner tonight? I've got something I want to share with you. Her heart skipped a beat. They had been talking about taking things slow, but Liam had a way of making everything feel urgent and important, and tonight seemed like no exception. She quickly typed back, sure, what time, and soon, they had agreed to meet at a restaurant nearby. As the evening approached, Emma found herself both nervous and eager. Dinner with Liam had become something she looked forward to, but tonight, she could feel the weight of his words, wondering what it was he wanted to share with her. She tried to calm herself as she got ready, but the sense of anticipation lingered. When she arrived at the restaurant, the soft hum of conversation and clinking of silverware created a warm atmosphere. She was seated at their usual table by the window, and soon enough, Liam arrived. He looked tired, but there was a certain determination in his steps, as if whatever he had to say was something he had been thinking about for a while. Hey, he greeted her softly, his smile warm, but his eyes revealing something more serious. Thanks for coming. I've been meaning to talk to you about something important. His voice held a quiet urgency that caught Emma's attention immediately. Of course, Emma replied, her voice steady despite the nerves running through her. What's on your mind? She couldn't help but wonder if this was the moment where everything would change. It felt like they were on the edge of something, but she didn't know what. Liam took a deep breath, his gaze locking with hers. Emma, I've been thinking a lot about where we're headed. About everything, our work, this connection between us, and what happens next. He paused, as if carefully choosing his next words. I don't want to keep dancing around this. I care about you. I've cared about you for a while now. His words were simple, but they carried so much weight. His honesty was disarming. Emma felt a flutter in her chest, a mix of excitement and apprehension. She had known it was coming, but hearing him say it out loud still made her heart race. Liam, she began, her voice soft, I care about you too. I don't know what this is yet, but I can't ignore what's happening between us. It scares me, but I don't want to hide from it anymore. Her words were a release, the truth she had been holding back finally coming to the surface. Liam reached across the table, his hand resting over hers. I don't want to rush this, he said, his voice gentle but firm. But I also don't want to wait until it's too late to figure out how we really feel. He squeezed her hand, his eyes filled with sincerity. Whatever happens, I want us to figure this out together. His words hung in the air between them, full of promise and possibility. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the restaurant seemed to fade into the background, and it was just the two of them, standing at the edge of something new and unknown. Emma's heart was still pounding, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from something else, something that felt right, something that felt like it could be the beginning of a new chapter. I think we're ready to take this step, Emma said finally, her voice steady. We don't have to have all the answers right now, but I'm willing to see where this goes. She smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was making the right choice, not just for her career, but for herself. Liam smiled back, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Me too, Emma. Me too. He leaned back in his chair, and for the first time that evening, the tension between them lifted. They didn't need to say anything more, everything they felt had already been said. Tonight was just the beginning of a new chapter, and though they didn't know where it would lead, they were ready to find out together. As the weeks passed, Emma and Liam's connection only deepened. They continued to work together on their art outreach program, but now there was something more between them. The air was filled with unspoken understanding, and every interaction, every glance, carried a weight that neither of them could ignore. Their conversations grew more personal, their moments together more intimate, and yet they both knew they were still navigating this new chapter cautiously. Their professional lives blended with their personal feelings, and it was a delicate balance they were learning to manage. One day, after a particularly successful meeting with the team, Liam pulled Emma aside. There's something I've been meaning to ask you, he said, his voice low, but there was a certain excitement in his eyes. Emma raised an eyebrow, wondering what this was about. He smiled softly, the familiar warmth in his gaze making Emma's heart race. I've been thinking a lot about the future. About us. What we're doing, where we're going. He paused, taking a deep breath, as if gathering his thoughts. I know we've been taking it slow, and I'm glad we've done that, but I can't help but wonder, what if we didn't wait anymore? What if we made this real, not just in our professional lives, but in every way? His words hung in the air, filled with possibility. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had known this moment would come, the moment where their feelings for each other would need to be addressed fully. But hearing him say it out loud made it feel so much more real. She had been trying to hold on to the fear that came with change, but in that instant, she realized that the fear was only holding her back. She looked at him, her eyes searching his for any sign of hesitation. But there was none. Liam was all in, and in that moment, Emma knew that she was too. She reached out, gently taking his hand in hers. "I've been thinking the same thing," she said softly. "I don't want to wait either. This feels right. I want to make this real too, Liam." Her voice was steady, but her heart was racing. This wasn't just a professional decision anymore. It was personal, and it was everything. The relief that washed over Liam's face was instant. He squeezed her hand gently, his smile widening. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," he said. It's all worth it. And I want to make sure we build this, whatever it is, the right way." His words, simple yet profound, made Emma feel a sense of peace settle over her. They were on the same page, and that was all that mattered. Their relationship had blossomed from something tentative, something filled with questions and uncertainties, into something solid, something real. And as they continued to navigate this new phase of their lives, Emma knew that this was just the beginning. Whatever challenges they would face them together. And in that moment, with Liam by her side, Emma felt ready for whatever the future had in store for them. Later that evening, after a quiet dinner and a long walk through the city streets, Emma and Liam stood at the edge of a park, the lights of the city twinkling around them. They were no longer just two people working together, they were partners, in both work and life. As they looked out at the horizon, they knew that the road ahead would not always be easy, but it would be theirs to walk together. As Liam took Emma's hand and held it close, he leaned in, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm so glad we're doing this together." Emma smiled, her heart full. "Me too, Liam. Me too." And as they stood there, side by side, they knew that this was just the beginning of their journey, one that was full of promise, love, and endless possibilities.